Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is TB Skyn, and as is my habit, when a piece of animation that I'm excited about hits the internet, let's take a little trip through it. Not necessarily frame by frame, but we'll certainly slow down in places and take a look at some of the animation techniques that are being used and how they're used, and talk a little bit about why they contribute to such a wonderfully happy and lively piece of animation. Now, I should note up front, anyone who comes into this not knowing my channel or who I am, I'm not a animation expert, and I'm not a classically trained animator. I'm a hobbyist, and I mostly just talk about things that delight me and that I very much enjoy. And you should not expect like an industry-level expert breakdown of every single animation technique frame by frame kind of thing. This is an enthusiast trying to communicate some of the things that excites him about a piece of animation. In this case, it's going to be the Sonic Mania opening animation cinematic trailer, as you can see in the title up at the top of your screen. Now, this was released by Sega not too long ago on the Sonic the Hedgehog official Twitter account. I found a YouTube mirror, which we will use because I can frame by frame my way through that particular format. So, without further ado, we're not going to put any audio on because I'm kind of desperately hoping I'll be able to monetize this, so no audio, but we're gonna take a look at it nonetheless. There's not too much to talk about in the opening shots. These are just establishing shots, kind of teasing what's going on, but there is a little touch which you should take a look at. This is just a static shot, right, of an elevator thing on like an old-timey elevator going up, but nonetheless, and this is something that happens a number of times throughout the video. If you look out on your left there, you can see that little sparkle just kind of gliding along the rim, which I thought was just a lovely little touch. It's such a small thing, but it does something to... This is so static a shot. It's just got this one thing moving, so having that gives slight more impression of there being life in the world we're about to visit. And something I noticed about the animation, first up, right off the bat, is that you could mistake it for your typical anime, right? Because of the hardline style and the way things move, but there's also something very Western about it. I think it's a style that's kind of, it's been around for a while, and it has kind of existed in the background, and it's been present certainly in shows like Steven Universe, where you have these anime influences in the ways that characters move and the ways that characters speak, but also very much informed by Western animation traditions with a lot of squash and stretch going on. It's like it's a curious mix that I can't quite, break into pieces for you, but it's something that is absolutely, if you're an animation aficionado, look out for it. And I love the little gestures the characters do here, because already here they are building character for who is Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, for those who don't know, and believe it or not, there are people who don't know. And what you're getting here is, look at Tails. Look at this happy little dork. He's just like, I'm excited to go adventuring with Sonic, right? He's got that bright-eyed, open eyes, smile, looking straight ahead. I'm curious about what's on the other side of the door. Then there's Sonic, who's trying to be too cool for school. Just going there, yeah, I know what's on the other side of this door. I'm going to go having an adventure and eat chili dogs and stuff. And then you've got Knuckles right next to him, completely copying him, emulating him, right? It's like, I'm just as cool as Sonic. That's definitely me. And as the doors slide open, you can see the way that each of them approaches, the landscape before them is Knuckles just looks up. And then just kind of looks off to the side. Because he's not that interested. He is kind of the angry one, the kind of brooding one. Sonic looks up and he's like, ha ha. He's got that slight smirk of arrogance about him. And then Tails, continuing his characterization, goes, yay! Everything's so cool and I'm happy. Which is something I quite like. And then Sonic and Tails look at each other as they start to run off, and Knuckles tries to get a head start on Sonic. You see that? He's starting ahead of anyone else running, because I'm gonna be first, damn it! But once Sonic takes off, you get the sense that he's definitely got the more speed of the three. And one of the ways they accomplish that is that Knuckles, when he runs, you see this just kind of takes a couple of steps. There's not much to it. Sonic does the whole, Knuckles just kind of takes off. Sonic does a whole wind-up thing. Look at him in the middle there, kind of getting ready, and then you get the poof, that little pow, that little kickoff, that gives him such a greater sense of speed than Knuckles, who just kind of starts moving. Tails also has a wind-up, literally, with his tail. But Sonic is the only one who gets that poof when he takes off, which gives him that greater sense of speed. Also, the classic Speedlines meme thing going on here. Which is just... And the whole animation is filled with little clever bits like this. I also love the run cycle they have for Sonic because it's so expressive. Look at him. Like, this is not just a dude. He's not doing like the cool Naruto run that was kind of prevalent for modern Sonic for a long time. This is someone who's full stride, doing the full like leg forward skip, boing, boing, like this. There's bounce. There's so much bounce to him. You can see it also in the way that his head. He does this little nod. Down, up, down, up, down, up. And the arms kind of carry him. This is an interesting choice, especially for Sonic, who's very much about his legs. But you can see it's for this run cycle, it's more like it's the arms that carry him. You can see how he punches forward in the air. It's kind of like that drags him. And then his legs kick in. And I love the animation smears here. Look at this. This looks like ink, like splattered out. And then it turns into the classic Sonic run spiral. And the beautiful thing about this technique of animation is, you can see as I advance the frames, it's not like the spiral is really moving rapidly. It's not like there's a whole lot going on, but the way that the streaks of red and a little bit of gold and a little bit of white are arranged in this very dynamic, very squashed infinity sign pattern gives the sense that like if something is rotating really, really rapidly. And that's such a clever bit of use. And I also love you can see when he's winding up to, and then he does, it's like he's a spring, right? He compresses down like a spring, and then he gets ready. And you can see he starts kicking up dust behind him, which again is such a lovely little detail. And there's a lot of effects going. You see this little effect going on out here, which transitions into these stars, and then he starts kicking up the dust. And again, as you can see on the loop here, it's not like there's a whole million lines moving at the same time to convey the sense of speed. It is entirely the shape of the thing along with those jagged lines along the edge that gives it the movement. It's this fantastic little frame. Whee! Right? Because we're completing the spring motion that started here. He does the spring and then boom. And again, some lovely animation smears because this circle here has to be resolved. You can't just make it disappear from one frame to another. So they resolve it by having these little smears follow the line of Sonic's motion as he flips over in there. And you can see he's being stretched here. There's some excellent squash and stretch going on. As he's being flipped over, these smears follow his feet. And then finally, once he completes the flip, they vanish. And I just love it. And I love this little in-between frame where he changes from wee to ha-ha. And then boom, down, and you can see he restarts the run thing. And again, all the speed is communicated just by the streaks going on. And this little lovely circle behind him here, sort of indicating that rapidly spinning feet were here for just a moment. And then you get these wonderful, this is so 90s somehow. I think the color combination, for some reason, it reminds me of a lot of 90s aesthetics with the stars and the bright contrasting colors. And all this busyness kind of serves a purpose. It informs, like, if you didn't have all these stars and sparkles and crazy things going on, I don't think this intro would be as fun and as whimsical as it is. But because all those things are there, and again, talking about 90s aesthetics, look at the background in this thing. This is so almost painfully, like, rooted and grounded in that 90s aesthetic that also informed Sonic in the Genesis era. And by the way, similar to the spin loop on Sonic's feet, Tails' tails don't really, like, there's not that many lines moving on the cycle. It's just that they move this bit of white around. You can see that's pretty much the thing that's actually spinning. And because it's so jagged and kind of frayed, you get the sense that, oh, there's a lot of speed going on here, even though there aren't not nearly as many as you'd think. It is just this trumpet shape, basically, that's kind of been spun just a little bit frame by frame. And you'll also notice that as Sonic, you can still see Sonic's features when he's running along here, right? But as he gets faster and faster and gets further and further away, he just becomes a blue blur, literally just this blue streak in the background. And Tails, again, they're characterizing him in that where Sonic he is rushing the hell ahead. Tails comes into the frame, he stops, he looks around, yay, this is fun, he's having an adventure, which is a brilliant little bit of characterization. And this is something that there's a lot of Sonic fans who have a lot of opinions about why classic Sonic is the best or why new Sonic is the best. For me, the thing it comes down to is I've always loved silent characterization more than dialogue characterization. I think it's more fun. WALL-E is one of my favorite movies of all time. And that's something this animation trailer does a great job at, is giving the characters character, like informing their personalities without ever saying a word. Some more animation technique coming in here. You can see, again, Sonic is a streak here. He's doing the whole rolling thing. But now we need his feet to start coming into frame. So what do? We start putting these little red blots on screen that resolve and become, that's his feet. Like, we introduce the red color before Sonic stops spinning, so that when the red color shows up in his feet, it's not like the feet popped into existence. They were always, it feels more like they were there from the start. And you can see it again here as we have this transitionary frame where they're not placed like they're his feet at all. They're just these two little red blobs that follow him around. And here you can see that this is definitely an anime technique. If you look at the little blobs around here, indicating that Sonic is flailing, that's 100% an anime technique. Whereas a lot of the squash and stretch, that's not something you would see in, like, anime typically. Like, it's fairly rare because it's the kind of technique that Disney would be prone to use. The squashing, the stretching, the deformation of characters like that, especially to create motion. It is a lot more common in Western animation than it is in the very limited animation that classic anime is known for. Like, you won't see that many of them in Dragon Ball, for instance, especially not when characters are not doing extreme action poses. And you can see the flailing transitions into his hands, and like, if you're animating this, the mistake might be to change Sonic any more than just letting his hands become actual hands in this frame might have made it look a lot weirder, but because that's the only thing that changes, you kind of forgive it. And then we have this stopping motion. Look at how Sonic is like, oh bugger, I have to make a sharp turn here, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, gets one foot on the ground, boom, and that kind of stops a lot of his momentum, but it doesn't stop all of his momentum, so he kind of spins off his own heel and almost flies over the edge. You can see here, that's a face full of regret right there. That's what that is. That is a man who has realized something bad is gonna happen, but we can still. Oh, a lovely little ballerina landing there. Ta-da! And there you can see again the spring motion. This is also something that Sonic is invested with a lot in this thing. He's very bouncy, which also informs his character again, right? Because you can see when he lands here, he compresses like a spring. He gets squashed. And then from the motion comes from his feet that now he's unstretching, and that motion goes in an arc this way, as though he was a slinky that had landed and was about to bounce over the edge. So he kind of has to do this lovely, cartoony, flailing, rotating of the arms, which is also, I'm pretty sure this is more or less the same animation that he has in one of his games when he's standing on the edge of a platform or something, and he kind of does a flailing animation. And then you can see with the rotation of the arms, he kind of pushes himself forward, poof. And you can see literally his arms are pushed backwards as though he's pushing himself away from the edge, straight back into spinning up the wheels and taking off using that wonderful infinity band marker, which is just instantly iconic It's always been kind of a part of how Sonic is put together. And here, this is a wonderful thing. You see, we're going from this shot, which is kind of static, and we've been pretty stable in looking at this particular section of the road. Now we're going into this free fall super speed shot. So now that everything else is blurring, we need something to keep leading our eyes, to help us keep a focus on what the hell is going on, right? So we've got this plume of dust extending behind Sonic, which is much more in focus than much of the rest of it, and then the two bands of the road keeping everything in focus so that we still get this sense of motion that Sonic is running just ahead of the camera. And as we catch up to him, he becomes the focus. The smoke kind of clears away. And it's just a very clever little thing to lead the eye to keep the viewer from getting confused or disoriented. And again, Sonic with this wonderful, you can see he's having fun doing this. Like he's just enjoying himself. He kind of springs off into free fall and just kind of enjoys himself going whee, and then into the spin again. I mean, he does have the cool face, like the smirky 90s attitude, cool face, but then sometimes he just kind of lets it slip. This is a face just like Tails, right? This just moment of wonder, like, whoa, this is so much fun. I can't believe I get to do this. And again, with the spring, you can see he smears as he hits the ground. Boom, compresses, uncompresses, hits the ground again. And this lovely little bit of smearing to speed it, to rev his legs up. And again, just like in the first shot we analyzed of how Sonic moves, boom, he winds up, he kind of compresses a little bit, boing, like a spring, does a somersault, and then, oh, this is a good frame, as he compresses, like he's bouncy. Everything about him bounces, which is so good for a platformer that's a lot about the character, you know, bouncing. And I love the way that they have articulated his limbs in this animation too, by the way. Now, Sonic's limbs have always been kind of noodly spaghetti arms, which in modern Sonic, sometimes it looked a little bit weird that he didn't have like an elbow at all. Like there was just this noodly appendage. But here, because there's in most frames they're so thin, he becomes almost like a stick figure, and it becomes kind of all right that there aren't any articulated limbs, like, because once you make it thicker, once you make it into a more realistic proportion, the eye kind of starts to look for realism, as in, where the heck are the joints in this thing? How does it work? How does it bend? But by keeping it so thin and so stick figure-like, you kind of don't have to justify it that much. Where are his elbows? Wherever the shot needs them to be. And again, with the spring, he compresses. He compresses a lot. And boing, literal spring, actually, sends him flying. And again, Tails is busy looking around, while Sonic is much more, I'm going to swing around this, and I'm going to do acrobatics and stuff. And Tails is like, oh, there Sonic is. And Sonic kind of dashes off. And again, a little character moment. Sonic alone is dour and kind of introspective, thoughtful, has a more serious expression on his face. Sonic with a friend, he lights up. He's happy. Tails, buddy boy, happy to see you. And a lovely little... I love the motion that they're about to get into here, because Tails is about to spin Sonic around and fling him. So as Tails comes into frame, he... Not only is he moving fast so that he can begin the rotationary motion, you can see the bent of his legs, right? Like the way that his body is curved, he's already setting up that there's going to be a rotation motion here. And they use so many of these lovely little blobs and stuff to kind of show motion and keep the characters moving. And now we get into the rotation. And look how Tails is, like, this is very much also a thing I often see in anime, is the thing where, like, Tails has almost entirely completed the spinning motion before Sonic even begins to follow. Like, he's over here not getting spun around at all for quite a long time, and Tails is, like, almost halfway rotated, kind of winding up tension And then that tension gets unleashed, and we get these wonderful smear frames, which have always been one of my favorite things in animation, is to stop and look at smear frames, because that's when the artist can just kind of go crazy and do stupid shit because it's only on screen for a single frame. But again, look at the way they mix the colors in order to keep in mind for us that this is Sonic and Tails, and Sonic and Tails are spinning around each other. They're not combining, they're not merging, they're not becoming one thing. The colors are kept very distinct and separate. And you can see they keep putting the red smears in there to indicate the shoes of both Sonic and Tails. And as they start mixing themselves up the most, almost becoming like one single entity, boom, you can see the colors separate. And the colors separate, boom, and then one of the colors becomes a character, with Tails hitting that completed rotation motion, flinging Sonic away. And here, because this frame is so fast, you don't really need detail on Sonic. He can just be a ball with some spikes on it. Squash him out like a pancake. Wham! And again, this helps set up that bouncy, springy mode. Like, Sonic is a bouncing ball in this thing, much like he is supposed to be in the game. And the reason this works so well is because you have that bouncy motion. And I love this when he punches through the portal, you get this pow frame that really gives power to him going through the ring, which justifies why it starts spinning so fast all of a sudden. Introducing the bad guy. I love this robot, dude. Look at him. He's bouncy too, see? He's not stiff. Well, he is stiffer than Sonic, certainly, but there is a doing kind of bouncing up and down motion to the way that he moves, which again gives him a lot of character, and kind of it grounds him in the same universe as Sonic, that he exists in the same kind of bouncy, flexible aesthetic, even as he still remains clearly a robot. And a lovely little touch with the smoke. Like, he leaves a smoke trail, but the smoke kind of has to chase him off the frame. Rather than coming out of his jetpack, it kind of chases him, which is a lovely thing. And again, you can always pause this thing, and you'll find these little stars and blips and little bits of color that just kind of bounce out at you, which adds to the whimsical nature of. And again, it's a remarkable consistency in the way that Sonic moves. Again, he lands, he bounces, he flips, and now he's on his feet, right? And he does this again and again and again in the animation. And you can see again, serious face Sonic for a second. What's going on here? And then it's like, wow, this is cool. This is fun. An oblivious Sonic. And this one, I had some trouble when I was watching it just like normally to parse exactly what was going on. This might be the weak moment of the thing, because as the robot fires, I love Sonic's realization moment, right? You see, stiffens up, woo, all his hair stands on end, literally, as this thing charges up. And you can see the recoil begins, boom, kind of throwing the robot backwards. And I kind of missed it, this motion here, like that Sonic is bouncing off to the right the first time I saw it. So Sonic just kind of vanished for me, which kind of makes sense because he's supposed to be super fast, right? But again, you can see that Sonic keeps his springy motion, because he kind of squashes, deforms, stops for a second, then he winds up again, and pow, he bounces away like a ball. As the robot tries to shoot him a couple more times, and this is just such lovely smoke animation. Like, this is really bloody difficult, you can see how while the characters are moving, the smoke is also moving at a different timing. Like, it's not, the smoke doesn't change usually at the same frame as the characters move, which creates a wonderful dynamic feeling, but it's really bloody hard to manage your frames to get that, ooh, lovely animation smear, to get that asynchronous motion that makes the scene come alive. And again, Sonic with the wind-up of the spin dash as he bounces back. Once again, here's Knuckles. again, with this, like, he's got this, unlike Sonic, who's very, very, very bouncy and very rubbery, Knuckles is much more solid, right? Like, he lands, but he doesn't immediately bounce back up. He just kind of, boom, has an impact, and then he lands, and then he's just standing there. There's not really much bouncing to him. There's not that much, that spring wind-up kind of thing. Another lovely animations here. And again, notice how, in this scene, remember how I talked about how the smoke moves asynchronously from the rest of the characters? It's the same thing here. You can see the ring moves even when Knuckles doesn't, and Knuckles moves when the ring doesn't. And because they're not completely synchronized, they feel more distinct from each other. It makes the scene come just a little bit more alive. And then the lovely detail of Knuckles, just poor Knuckles just swinging on this thing as Sonic is like, I have saved my animal friends. And notice how, if you remember the infinity symbol shape that Sonic used for his legs when he was running, it kind of shows up a lot in the squashing of Sonic. You can see that kind of eight type shape that shows up as Sonic, whoom, tells everybody he has just made an account on Twitter. I think they're promoting the Twitter account. I'm sure that's what that means. And job done, Sonic goes, ha, I am so freaking cool. Which again is a lovely bit of characterization on the character. That's just, all the characterization this thing does, it does in tiny little frames in betweens that you barely get to see for a second before they're gone. And there's also lots of use of, you can see motion blurring. Like, nothing really, there's not that many frames of animation. He's there, he winds up to spin, then he spins, then there's 2 frames where he lands, and that's it. Like, but the motion blur sells the impact of that a lot. It helps it a lot, like almost as though the camera is shaking. And again, pooh, little stars, yay! Which makes it, again, which keeps it from becoming too self-serious. Even as Sonic makes this, oh yeah, superhero landing ballerina pose, and has to look cool. Here comes another bit of characterization. Notice as Tails comes in to land, right? How does he land? Light on his feet. Like, there's barely an impact. He times the release of his tails perfectly, so that he just lands light as a feather. Whereas if you look at Sonic, once again, how does Sonic land? Sonic lands, he compresses again. Again, everything about him is compressed down. And then he goes vroom, up, stretches out. Like a spring that has been compressed, he stretches back out. Tails comes in, he lands light as a feather. And then Knuckles comes in, boom, pounds down like a rock, and slowly unfolds himself. He doesn't spring back, he unfolds like a statue. And again, that moment of quiet characterization where Knuckles is like, my landing is cooler than your landing, brushes himself off, and Sonic goes, oh, you think so? And they're about to have a race, because of course they are. They're rivals. Knuckles is the one who challenges. I'm ready to go. Sonic is like, I'll follow you there. And then Tails is like, I'll play too, because he's a young, cute, adorable little fox guy. And here might be the best of the foot smears. Zoom. Zooming to one side, zooming to the other side, and finally when it centers, bow, ready to go. Because again, Sonic moves like a spring, right? Knuckles just starts moving. He doesn't take off, he doesn't kick off, he just starts moving. Tails winds up his tails a little bit, and then he moves forward kind of gently, like it's a fan that's powering him from behind. And Sonic winds up, ties himself up like a string, and then goes, like, boom, shoots off like that. And like he's a pinball. And everything about the animation in this short is brilliant. I've talked about 1 minute and 26 seconds of animation for half an hour now. And you can probably, as you can probably tell by now, I love this piece of animation. Everything about it, I think, went right, managed to communicate what Sonic is supposed to be, what he's supposed to be about. And it's just, this was so important to me because I have high hopes for Sonic Mania. It's a game that seems to understand why the Genesis games were popular. Like, that seems to understand both the gameplay, but also that feeling, that sensation, who these characters were back then, what it was about them that resonated, that Sonic, yeah, he's cool and he's got an attitude, but he has fun. Like, he enjoys himself. He's out there for adventure. To look cool, to show off, because he is a cool guy, but also because he's just enjoying himself. He's having fun. He's not Shadow the goddamn Hedgehog being serious about everything and how his girlfriend is dead or whatever. And Tails is this young, naive, happy kind of sidekick character who's just having fun following Sonic around, and Knuckles is the more serious, the more heavyweight character, but who nonetheless is still kind of a playful character, because, like, he's curious. When he pops up on the ring there, he pops up to look because he's curious. What's going on here? I want to check this out. And then he gets bounced off, right? So all this characterization that they're not just cool. They're not just radical. They don't just have an attitude. They're not just badass. But there's this fun. There's this childishness to them that I think is just absolutely wonderful, which is part of what I used to love a lot about Sonic. That childish wonder at adventure, which I feel like has been missing. Other Sonic fans will probably disagree, which is fine. We don't all have to have the same idea of the character. But yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. Again, Jesus Christ, it's less than 1.5 minutes and I've talked for half an hour. If you enjoyed this, feel free to leave a like or a subscription. I occasionally do these videos when animation pieces come out that I'm excited about. And if you want to see more of it, leave a like or say so in the comments. And if you have something to say, something to tell me, leave that in the comments as well. I try to read everything. I try to respond to as much as possible. But my name has been TB Skyn. I've been talking for half an hour about 1.5 minutes of animation. And I'll see you next time.